Boy, and looking at the news, it already looks all fucked up. On one of my weekly adventures to go and deal with banking, giving the person the piece of paper that has the number on it, and the person says, I am putting this number with your other numbers, and now you could have more pieces of paper with numbers on them and exchange them for food. Every once in a while, I kind of go through that moment where I'm reminded of how the world looks when you're on hallucinogenics, and you're just sitting there staring at money or staring at a building. I remember one time, probably Mr. Trinkling will remember this, is when in the freshman year of college, when I came to the brilliant conclusion, oh my gosh, we're all assigned a box. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I want to use the bathroom. But to use the bathroom, I have to go to the specific box that I live in. And I can only use the bathroom in that box, because I've been assigned this box that I live in. And, we're all living in boxes within boxes, and of course there'd be rooms within an apartment or something like that. I thought this was quite brilliant. We were very high on mushrooms that night. They grew on the lawn of the college. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew the score. The Brifolt is making me think more of that thing of everybody knows the score. And it's really one of these things that you're constantly having to deal with. Really, it's like the white liberal waspy, like, what do you mean the score? Like, what do you mean? Oh, and I mean just and like the duplicitous liberal Ashkenazi who's given up on the fact that God and truth are linked, and so they're just as lost as any other culturalist kind of wayward soul. And there's also that is more and more starting to hit me, where I'm like, that's so sad. You don't understand this place, us as a people. So Hasan Piker getting kicked off of YouTube, or not YouTuber, getting suspended from Twitch so if you say, the Yankees don't get this. This is actually one of these things that really hit me in my own upbringing. Whoa, that's a neat place. Wow, this really stands out. That in my own upbringing, I didn't really realize until it was around high school that I started to encounter what we called in San Francisco at that time the Irishman. And then you would also have your friend who is Italian that they hadn't been to Italy, but they're Italian. And especially if you were like me, where you came out of the Catholic community, you had a lot, especially the Irish. And these were now no longer a people who, kind of saw, these were not, at that time, these were not people who took insults lightly. These were real men. And they would hand it to you. If you called them a Dago or a Mick, they would hand it to you. You got beat down. And so a lot of people need to understand that. It's equal opportunity. Don't welcome things like that. Don't talk that way to people. Just never call anybody anything like that, ever. Because it's equal opportunity. And there's still real men around who will deliver it. And somebody like Hasan Piker doesn't really get it, because he's not an American. This is really something that Hasan Piker has brought this up a few times on his own show, but that he'll say, well, I was born in Turkey, and so some things here are different. And yeah, you don't call people that. You're a foreigner. You obviously don't understand, what you don't call people, whether they're white or not. And so, because the thing is, cracker's not this term that refers to nobody. It's a very specific term. It's a term that applies to people of Greater Appalachia. You don't call them that unless you want to fight. You don't call people that. And and so I don't know what you were thinking, and just this idea you could get away with that. Like, you could get away with that with white Anglo-Saxon Protestant white liberal types, that there's almost no insult for other than comparing them to women. Yeah, that's almost the only thing about the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant types that our culture really sees that as the insult for their group, is that they're like women. And so, but with like without papers, WAP, Dago, I forget what where that, I once knew what that referred to, being that the reference to Ashkenazi Jews with the word kike. These are words you cannot use. They are European insults. They are insults that Europeans and Western Europeans and Eastern Europeans use for one another. And that this is something that really a big part of tolerance and the change in the Democratic Party is that the Democratic Party are the kind of people that would have this would have been their thing to actually in private company. Oh, I forgot, all of this is still frozen. The road here, the alley is frozen. Oh dang, I wonder if I should warn you. You're on a little motor thing. Let's see, yeah. But okay. So there's this idea that people are just throwing around such terms all the time as well. There's kind of this myth that, like, oh, in America people are just savaging each other with these horrible things that they're saying to one another. And most people aren't mean to each other. Most of the time in the street. When you're walking around, most people are cool to one another. They're not bothering each other. And so this world that people like Hasan Piker and Vaush are in is a world that's not working class. They are not shoulder to shoulder with other men working. You know, when somebody like me, I've been shoulder to shoulder with every race. There's been times I've had to speak 3 different languages at a job badly, very poorly, except for English. It was I had to speak English, a bit of kind of Mexican, now Salvadorian Spanish, and a very broken, messed up form of Portuguese, because of the people we had working there. And yeah, but it was fun. It was a blast. It was a blast. And so when I hear Hasan Piker and Vaush discuss these, what they think is the reality, when I hear their takes on America, one, Hasan didn't understand what the term. Okay, cracker comes from wisecracker. It's a term that Yankees would use for poor Southerners, because poor Southerners of Greater Appalachia, the more poor people, the people who weren't planters, they were the people who worked next to the slaves. These people, these poor, the PWT, poor white trash, as people like to call them. Well, the thing is, though, they're kind of the heart and soul of the country to a great extent. A lot of people sort of understand it as these are Elizabeth Warren's people. But yeah, that's who she would have probably been descended from, that general group. So people like Hasan Piker and when Vaush think that they could just use some term, just whip it, bandy it about and stuff, they don't really understand the weight of it. And Hasan doesn't, because Hasan's not an American. He's not a normal American. He doesn't really understand. People take words like that very seriously. And it's because it was they were oppressed. Like, poor white Southerners have always been under the heel of somebody. There's always been somebody who stands on them. Typically, the Yankees who came down after the war, or the planters. And then the varieties of other groups that people like Bausch and them wouldn't understand. Like, they wouldn't know what they're seeing in cinema if they were to see a Tidewater Chevalier. Like, they don't understand the Chevaliers of Virginia. Like, why are there liberal enclaves of the South? That didn't come from only Yankees. That also came from the Chevaliers. These people who consider themselves Normans. So they consider themselves more kind of a French English kind of people. Thomas Jefferson would have been a person who we would have ethnically thought of as a type of chevalier. And in many ways, I mean, it applies, being that he was so involved in Masonic culture too, with all of that kind of lore and and imagery and stuff to it. But yeah, chevalier, a cavalier, a chevalier. And so without knowing, like, this would have been an insult somebody of a higher class uses for somebody of a lower class among white people and in the South. So this was, again, like, now Hasan might have actually picked that up. He might have picked up that's how it's used, and that's the nature of it. But he also might not have. But I think, though, he kind of understands that, so he uses it like these low, uneducated white people who you know, these people whose necks are red because of all the labor they do in the sun, because that's where that comes from. That's the Greater Appalachian group. That was a pejorative for them by the British who brought them here, is they have, their necks are red from being in the sun. They are rednecks. That's where that term comes from. So a lot of the culture of that group has become the standard of Black Americans now, and that I could remember even within my lifetime this change, seeing elements of this change occur, such as wearing casual clothing all the time. That was not normal for Black Americans when I was a child. Having kind of extremely wild hairstyles, or having a lot of colors on at once. That was not normal to Black Americans when I was a child. My mother she wouldn't have let me leave the house with dreadlocks. She was not fond of such experiments, but it was because she was an older Black person who had a more conservative upbringing. So I just thought it was kind of interesting to see, because this was something that, just to hear Hasan Piker now and then talk about how he doesn't understand this or understand that, because this is a different culture, and it's just, no, you're a phony. You're a wealthy, you were always middle class, you're always wealthy, you're foreign, you're not really from here, you're not one of us. You like complaining. You're sort of this type of typical person of like when being from the States, you'll run into this every so often with middle class second generationers who complain a lot. There's the one who works hard, and then there's the one who complains, and it's just the way that it is. It's just this thing that you end up seeing a lot. That you'll just have the one kid who he works his ass off. The other kid, he's just always kvetching about some shit, and it just, he just never really became a part of it. It's still the States are still odd to him, and so some people, it's just like that. The states will always be odd to them, and they'll always feel on the outs, and then they'll always complain about it. And Hasan Piker has done that, and he has gone someplace that he has. If he were in the streets, he would have been taught a lesson by somebody if he called somebody that name, because you don't call people that name ever. Ever.